Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the December session of the Daring to Learn Value Added Webinar Series. My name is Elena Boyd. I am an extension specialist with the UT Center for Profitable Agriculture. If this is your first time joining us for a Daring to Learn session, welcome. We have our friends today, Kellie Padgett from the Kentucky Center for Agriculture and Rural Development. She's going to be talking us through managing for success and discussing some common challenges and suggested practices for value-added dairy businesses. Um, as I mentioned, Daring to Learn is a monthly webinar series. The topics change each month, and we have different speakers that join us from time to time. If this is your first Daring to Learn session, we will have a chance for Kellie to share with us as we move through the session this morning. And then towards the end, there will be an evaluation code, a QR code for you to scan that will take you to an evaluation survey where you can leave feedback for this session and for Daring to Learn in general. So if you have any feedback to share or suggested speakers or topics, that would be the place to leave that. For our Tennessee producers, if you are a Tennessee producer looking for Tennessee Agricultural Enhancement Program credit, you do have the opportunity to earn one educational credit for that TAEP program by participating in 5 Daring to Learn sessions throughout the year. You have until December 31st of 2025 to do that. That evaluation survey that I mentioned that will be at the end of this video, that evaluation survey is how you log your attendance and participation for that. So make sure to be on the lookout for that QR code towards the end. Just a few other housekeeping things. If you have questions throughout the presentation, you can drop those in the chat box. There are a couple of other ways to get a hold of us also. If you have a question that maybe is a little too difficult to ask through text and it's easier to do that through voice, we can turn your microphones on and give you guys a chance to ask that verbally. But as we go ahead and get started this morning, I am going to give Kellie a chance to introduce herself, and then I'll hand it over to her to take off.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time this morning. And like Lena said, my name is Kellie Padgett. I'm a senior business development specialist here at the Kentucky Center for Ag and Rural Development. So it's a mouthful. So we usually refer to our organization as KCARD. So Brent will not be joining us on the call today, but he is our executive director, and he brings we joke that he's here from the beginning of KCARD. We will celebrate our 25th anniversary next year in 2026, actually. So we've been working with the University of Tennessee on several projects. This big one we're going to be discussing today is focused on dairy businesses and value-added dairy businesses, and we'll kind of work through some of what that means in the presentation moving forward. But what our core business here at KCARD is working with any kind of ag business as far as if we try to say we meet them where they are. So if anybody needs business planning assistance, financial projections, grant facilitations, record keeping, you name it, we try to provide as much resources as we can in-house and then connect folks to where they need to go. So there's a little bit about Brent and myself there on the screen. I've also put a question in the chat just to get a good understanding of the folks on the webinar today so that I can kind of tailor a couple points of the presentation. I've asked if you're actively farming, a technical assistance provider, an educator, or all of the above. So if you don't mind to plop that into the chat, and I'll toss it back over.
Sounds great. Whenever you are ready to start screen sharing, Kellie, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay, looks like we've got a couple responses coming in, so I appreciate you all sharing. And if you don't feel comfortable, that's totally fine. Or if you're actively doing something else, I totally understand as far as multitasking through webinars. Let's see, I will go ahead and screen share here. So, and I've tested it, but okay, so just check for confirmation. We are seeing the slide, Elena?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Okay. Thank you for confirming that. So what we're talking about today, as the summary says, is the common challenges in value-added dairy businesses. So over the period of 2022 through 2024, we've been working with dairies in Kentucky, Tennessee, and the Carolinas, and we're just going to go through some of that today. Like I mentioned before, we are an independent nonprofit organization, so um, we do receive some federal funding, but also state funding. But that allows us to be pretty flexible in the support that we're able to provide producers here in Kentucky, as well as some neighboring states. I mentioned before we work with folks on business planning, financial projections, record keeping, you name it. We try to make sure that we um, provide whatever needs are required. So before I talk about the findings from these business evaluations, I did want to go through what a business evaluation is. So our acronym for them is a BMOA, so a Business Management and Operation Analysis. And that is also a mouthful. So what this consists of is at least one on-site visit. So once a dairy business has applied to receive the BMOA or the business evaluation, then we go and visit that farm or that facility in person. Typically, we like to have at least two staff members, sometimes three, depending on the size and the scale of the business. While we're there, we participate in interviews with owners, the employees of the facility. We also like to make sure that we visit a couple customers. So, for example, if a business has a wholesale division as well as a retail, then we do go and do our best to interview some of the wholesale customers as well as interview customers as they're coming into the retail facility. We look at any kind of survey data and just see how much customer feedback we can gain based on the type of business. Then we do jump into the financials. So in a perfect scenario, before we even get to the business, we like to have at least 3 years previous financial statements. That includes a profit and loss, a balance sheet, an income statement, cash flow, etc. A lot of times we may get pieces and parts of those statements before we do the on-site visit. And then when we're there in person, we're able to connect the dots and figure out what pieces are missing. But we do a comprehensive financial statement review. Once we have reviewed all those documentations, then before we even get to a written report, we do an oral report at the facility. So typically we're there anywhere from 2 to 3 days. On that last day, we meet with the owners and we have a written report, and then we also provide it in person. Any kind of key findings, whether that's positive or things that we may need to work on in the future. We like to make sure that we provide those pieces of information before we even leave the facility. So if there's anything we need to clarify, if an owner hears a finding that we received and it seems unclear, then we're able to clear that up before we even leave that business. And then we work through a detailed written report on the back end. So typically within 3 to 4 months of the site visit, we will send a detailed report. So from here, I am going to jump into the 6 common challenges that we found working with the businesses. And again, we were able to work with folks in Kentucky, in Tennessee. We had one in Puerto Rico. That was a really interesting experience. And then we combined all those findings into one. But before I jump into those, if you don't mind in the chat, just based on your experience, either as a farmer or as an educator or a technical assistance provider, what are 2 challenges that either you yourself are experiencing in your business or that you could see being a challenge for a dairy or a value-added dairy business? So I'm just going to give a couple minutes and we'll have those typed into the chat there. If you don't feel comfortable, that's totally fine. I understand. But I would encourage you to at least have, at least one challenge at the top of mind before we jump into them. So, here are the six common challenges that we found when looking at the different businesses. Number one is going to be employee communication and training. Number two is financial monitoring and inventory controls. The third was quality controls. The fourth is business vision and long-term planning. The fifth is fluid milk supply and quality. And then the last challenge was target marketing. Now, when I work through each of these challenges, I will provide the challenge and then some key recommendations. And we did put them into an order of if you were going to implement one or two of these in your business today or tomorrow, which one we feel may have the most impact and like either the quickest impact or the biggest impact right from the get-go. So I do want you all to keep that in mind as we go through these. We did try to put them into that order. And again, if you've got any questions as we're going through, please make sure that you're putting those in the chat. If you have any other recommendations that you think are helpful, then for other folks that might be on the webinar with us, please make sure you're communicating with those too. So challenge one, employee communication and training. It seems like no matter what industry you're in, or whether you're at work or your personal life, communication is incredibly important. And that is something that we found when working with some of these businesses and the value-added dairies. So on the screen, we've got three main themes that were across all the different businesses we worked with. The first is the lack of mission clarity and farm history knowledge. All of the businesses we worked with were established by one family, and then from there, they have grown. They may employ non-family members, or they may still all have just family members. There was a mixture of both. What we found was a lot of the folks that were working in a retail facility of the farm business were assumed to be members of the family. And so sometimes this can create a little bit of lack of communication there. The second was inconsistent training and role confusion. Some examples here were we would ask employees, so we would do one-on-one interviews with employees. And when we ask who their supervisor was, it was either inconsistent, it was a different person from whom it should be, or it was two people, always. It was, Bob and Sarah, always Bob and Sarah, not one or the other. And then the third key theme we saw was founder syndrome and the unclear chain of commands. So this goes a little bit hand in hand with that role confusion there, where if you are the person that started the business and it's a family business, sometimes letting go of key leadership or management duties can be hard. And that's human nature, right? We don't fault anybody for that, but it is something to work through. And sometimes that creates a little unclear chain of command where someone may have a manager role, but they aren't actually able to make manager level decisions. So those are some examples of the communication. Here we've got three suggested practices. The first one is going to be develop HR manuals and employee handbooks. So there are lots of different resources out there. Small Business Administration has options for HR manuals. There's lots of good templates to get you started, but that is our suggestion number one. The second is to create an organizational chart. So even if it's a small family-run business, it's important to know at the end of the day who's going to make decisions, and if that person can't make the decision, who do I go to from there? So the third is implementing the structured onboarding and training programs. So this just helps make sure that your messaging is clear and that everyone has access to the same knowledge base. And if you have to reference something, then there's the source of truth, for lack of a better term, that you can go back to from your training materials. So those are three things that we suggested when working with our dairies for improving some of those communication practices. The second is the financial monitoring and inventory controls. So like I mentioned before, we like to have a lot of that financial data prior to getting there in person. However, small businesses, it's hard to keep up with everything. You don't may not have a dedicated employee who's updating all your receipts. Or it may be you are having to do a lot of checking on the back end as the business owner. There might be some training gaps, etc. So that was just a really big theme that we saw across the folks that we worked with. Another um, challenge was the over-reliance on single individuals. Again, this is hard when you've got a smaller family-owned business, but having a backup plan for who can fill in for those key roles is really critical. And then poor inventory management. It's as folks are growing, you're going from more of a production-based business into that value-added space. Managing food that has a pretty short shelf life, whether you're doing yogurt or cheese or just fluid milk, really maintaining that inventory. What do you have on stock? What do your distributors have on in stock? If you're working with a distributor, are they managing that inventory well? Those are some things that were another challenge several businesses had. Our three suggested practices to kind of combat those challenges. One is to utilize a financial management system to make sure that your relevant data is being collected. We do not promote any one system over another. What we like to say at KCARD and when I'm working with clients is I want you to have a management system in place that you and your employees understand and will use. So if it's going to be too complicated, if it takes too many people involved to make the decisions or to input information, I'm going to tell you right there, it probably is not going to be the best option for your business. And so the next piece to help combat some of these financial challenges is to involve multiple staff in these financial tasks. If you are the only one that has all the passwords to everything, that is a room for improvement. And so as you're looking at your business or you're working with producers, really asking questions about who all has access to the financial records and who all is involved in maintaining those records is a really key thing to help improve this in your business. And then the third, excuse me, is to develop and monitor key performance metrics to help gauge your business activity. So this is really critical so that you as a business owner, or if you're working with a business, can see where progress is being made and where we may be falling short. These don't have to be really big and elaborate. It doesn't have to feel extremely corporate, but it is important that you have some performance metrics that you can just use as a, first year as what that, main bar is, and then how you want to grow. We're going to jump into our third challenge here, which is quality controls. So here we saw a lot of variations in recipes, and this has a huge impact on cost and consistency. So we worked with a myriad of different businesses from yogurt production to fluid milk to ice cream. A lot of the businesses also had a small cafe or like a deli included in their retail facility. And when we were having interviews with employees, you would ask one employee, how many scoops of ice cream do you put in your milkshake? And then we would ask the next employee, how many scoops of ice cream do you put in your milkshake? Unfortunately, it ranged anywhere from 1 to sometimes 4. So, and the ice cream is one of the most expensive ingredients in that milkshake. The other example I will provide is working with a sandwich, so a deli sandwich, and you ask what the recipe is. Some employees would say, "Oh, I just look up at the board," and they point up, which is where the menu was above the line there in the deli. Some folks said, "Oh, my manager just told me to add a little bit less than what I would use at home." If any of y'all are cringing right now, then that was definitely some room for growth for those businesses, and we did see that across the board. So it didn't matter what type of value-added dairy product that you served. This seemed to be a pretty common theme. And this goes right into a lack of posted SOPs or standard operating procedures. and then measurements in the facilities. So making sure that employees can see what those are was something that was another area for improvement. A couple suggested practices there. Going along with the HR and training and onboarding, make sure that you've got in there how to train new and employees and when they're going to be trained. So training happens on a daily basis, hopefully for most businesses. So it's not just when your employees are new to your business, but also when do we need to have regular check-ins? How are your current staff training your new staff? These are just really good ways and things to have in that HR manual of, okay, every 6 months we're just going to do a regroup. What are the ingredients? How do you find the recipe if you don't know it? Things like that. The second one here I've kind of mentioned a little already, but create and post your standard operating procedures and recipes. If the recipe is handwritten and it's in shorthand, which means it's a little hard to understand, it may be just a good best practice or a good goal for this year to make sure that it's typed up and saved in multiple places and then easily posted. So this can be a recipe for anything. It could be a recipe for cheese, can be a recipe for a milkshake, could be a recipe for ice cream. Just really important that that's written out in a way that other folks can read it in your business. And then the last thing here is regularly review the quality and production outcomes. Depending on your level of quality controls, you may be able to monitor this pretty regularly, or this may be just something that you observe. So you walk into your retail facility and you watch your staff and just see what happens. Do they seem like they feel comfortable with the recipes? Does there seem to be a lot of variations? Customer surveys can help with this too. So those are three of our practices for this challenge. As we work through challenge number 4, so this is bigger, we're getting into bigger picture here. So this is where the business vision and the long-term planning seem to be a pretty consistent theme for a lot of the folks we worked with. Only less than half of the folks we worked with had a written business plan or a succession plan. So a succession plan would be what happens when the owner, or if it's a multiple owner business, if they no longer want to be involved. So that is what the difference between that business plan versus succession plan. The next thing we also observed was the infrequent owner management meetings. We all like to have the annual meeting at the beginning of the year, right? That seems to be a pretty good anchor meeting that most of our businesses had. However, from there, it seemed like most meetings happen very ad hoc. So a conflict came up between staff, or a crisis occurred, or something else was the reason that the management team got together. And then the last thing here on this slide is the priorities among the staff and key personnel sometimes conflicted. So either the owners, if it's a multi-owner business, they either had different priorities or they would like different outcomes from the business, or key staff who were making day-to-day leadership decisions may not have been in line with what the owners thought were priorities. Here's a couple suggestions based on those observations. We like to make sure that folks have a written business plan. I always mention this is a living document. So this is not something that is like a rotisserie chicken where you set it and forget it. This is something that's going to be growing and morphing with your business as it grows into whatever it needs to into the future. We have some suggestions up here, resources like AgPlan, LivePlan, KCARD, we have a template. Folks, we've got lots of partners throughout the Southeast that have different templates. It's really a great starting point, and then building on there and making sure that you update it is another key thing. We recommend holding regular and structured staff meetings. I know everybody is so excited about a weekly staff meeting until they don't happen. Even here within KCARD, we have weekly meetings, and sometimes they can feel a little blah. But if we don't have them, I think staff all agree how much we do rely on that one weekly touch point at minimum that we have with staff. So implementing some kind of a regular or structured staff meeting I love agendas. If you're able to just provide a couple goals that you want to make sure that you want to accomplish in the meeting is even a second thing when you look at those meetings. And then the third piece here is to include legal and financial advisors in your key business decisions. This is just to make sure that the owners, if it's a multi-owner business, that you all are all getting on the same page. And if you're not able to do that, sometimes a legal or financial advisor may be able to serve as a mediator. So this is just, we suggest to have somebody to really serve as that mediator and making sure that everyone has the same priorities and is working towards that same goal. Next, we're going to move into the fifth challenge, which is fluid milk supply and quality. Several of our businesses, actually the majority of the businesses we worked with, only had a single milk resource. A lot of times it was themselves that was providing milk for their value-added business. Or they had maybe multiple milk sources, but it was a little uncertain on which one they may be able to use week to week. So this is just something, again, it's not the top thing we saw, but it was an issue that occurred enough that we want to make sure that you're thinking about it within your business or as you're working with businesses, that it's a question that is asked. And then the inconsistent volume and quality impact of that milk really impacts that profitability. So as you are working with different suppliers, we want to encourage folks that you're testing more than just the mandatory testing. You're making sure that the farm you're receiving the milk from is up to the quality that you need for whatever product. It might look a little different if you're doing a specialty cheese versus a fluid milk, might look a little different there. And just really understanding how that will impact that retail quality product. A couple of suggested practices here is one, we would encourage folks to diversify suppliers and make sure that you've got some of those communication protocols. If one of your farms that's supposed to supply you, if I'm a cheese maker, and I've got 3 farms that I work with, I really don't want to know the day of a milk ship delivery that you can't make it. So putting in some of those communication protocols where, if there is an emergency, we understand that happens, but what do we do and how do we act upon that? And then making sure you've got that diversity of your suppliers. If you are supplying your own milk for your own value-added product, make sure you're monitoring that herd output and quality. Are you working with your vet? Are you getting more than just the mandatory testing? How many pounds of milk are you getting? Just really looking at the trends from year to year is really, really important. And while we think it would be something that everyone is doing, we found that it's not necessarily something that's happening on a year-to-year trend basis. So we just really suggest to do that. And then make sure you're utilizing your resources. We have here listed the extension services, your universities. There's so much information online. Make sure that you are reaching out if you do think you have any issues or if you've got questions. We just really encourage folks to reach out prior to realizing that, oh, this problem is not something we can fix very quickly. And then here, we're going to talk through the target marketing was the 6th challenge. Like with any small business in any industry, not just agriculture, but clothing industry, etc., it can be really hard to have dedicated personnel to do each individual job. Unfortunately, marketing seems to be something that most, and we see it a lot in ag businesses, but also just small businesses in general, typically don't have that dedicated person that is working on the marketing and putting together that marketing plan. And so this really came back when we were asking, okay, how often do you post? Who's in charge of posting? What methods do you all use for your marketing campaign? Some folks were able to talk through that very easily. Some folks were able to talk through it. So they realized they may not have it, but they could put a plan in place. And then some businesses weren't able to talk through it at all. So we just recommend that you've got some kind of a marketing plan, even if it's you as the business owner doing it. There are ways that you can schedule posts, et cetera, et cetera. So what this also kind of leads into is a little difficulty in balancing your wholesale and your retail efforts if you've got both. So your wholesale customers are going to have different needs than your retail customers. So if, for example, if I'm going to go back to my cheesemaker business, so if I'm selling cheese to Kroger, which is a grocery retailer here in Kentucky, I guess I should probably choose Walmart. My apologies. If I'm selling cheese to Walmart, then their marketing needs, when I'm talking to that purchasing manager, are going to look a lot different than if Cindy Smith walks into my cheese plant and says, I need 2 pounds of sharp cheddar. That marketing, I'm going to target those customers totally different. So that was another trend that we saw is really looking into the needs of your customer. If you have that wholesale piece, what are they going to need? And if you've got the retail customers, what are they going to need in your marketing plan? And then that last piece there is really utilizing the customer feedback. A lot of the businesses, I think, yeah, the majority of the businesses we worked with had a digital point of sale system. So think Square, Clover, etc. And what that's doing is it's collecting all that information that you can use for later. Cell phone numbers, email address, etc. Social media is a great way to use this, but we, when we're talking with folks, using that customer feedback, even if they followed up with the survey, implementing that feedback was sometimes something that just fell off the radar or wasn't something that a business was able to implement. And here are just some suggested practices. So you, like I mentioned before, using those surveys, your point of sale system data, that POS data, and then that customer feedback, whether it's, a QR code where people scan at the register and put in for a free ice cream if they, fill out the survey, etc. Developing that marketing plan and then tracking what you've implemented is also something really critical. It's great to put the plan together, but it's the second piece there is were you actually able to execute the plan? Were there things that you thought would be really easy? As a business owner, I assign the employee I would like to be in charge of marketing. I want them to take 2 videos a week and post 4 times a week on our social media page. Was that doable or was it not? Can we do more? Putting some metrics in place is really important. And then that third piece there is to craft that brand and make sure that it aligns with the promotions of the customer needs. This goes back to really looking at if you have both types of businesses, retail and wholesale, their needs are going to look different. One step further is if you do only have retail customers, what are the demographics of each of those breakdowns? So if I'm going to be marketing to people with families and children, that group will have different needs than if I'm marketing to a school group or excuse me, a school that's going to promote fluid milk in their school system. Those are going to look a little different. And so really understanding that customer demographic is important there. And from here, I am going to open it up to questions. So I am going to go to my last slide here, but I'm going to skip on over to where we've got our contact information. And then I'll also quit sharing and I'll put it in the chat. So if there are questions, I can see those a little easier. But this is our direct line. This is our direct email. Obviously, the folks at UT can get a hold of us as well, but I do appreciate your all's time today. I'm going to quit sharing here so that we can talk through any questions. Okay.
All right. Like Kelly said, for you guys that are still on with us, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat box. Or, like I mentioned at the beginning of the call, if you have one that you think you need to ask verbally, feel free to let us know also, and we can unmute your microphone. That way you can ask. And while we are giving you guys a chance to kind of get those questions together for Kelly, I will go ahead and pop up our evaluation survey. So this is that survey I mentioned at the beginning of the call for our Tennessee producers. If you're looking for that TAEP credit for the Tennessee Ag Enhancement Program, this is the way to record attendance for that. But also to just share any general feedback with us as well about Daring to Learn or any ideas you may have. That's the place to do it. Um, Feel free to ask any questions you have at all. We'll hang out for a few minutes and give you guys a chance to get those together.
And I realized I didn't go through this in the beginning, but while we're just sitting here for a few minutes, we were able to work with 11 different businesses. And like I mentioned before, they were within Kentucky, North Carolina, Tennessee, and then Puerto Rico. And so we did really enjoy the myriad of different experiences that provided. So I realized I didn't provide that number in the beginning.
Oh, one other thing that I want to mention also, and I don't know if you did this, Kelly, I'll just plug it in again. There actually is an extension publication coming out through UT Extension from the Center for Profitable Ag about these business evaluations and the information that Kelly shared in the presentation today. That's not quite ready yet, but it should be available in the new year or very soon. Um, if we if we get lucky, it might be the end of this month, but we'll see. It's very, very close. So there will be an extension publication available soon with this information in there. Um, and for those of you that are still on the call, I don't want to rush anybody if you are typing, but if those of you that are still hanging out, if you don't have any questions, feel free to go. And I will share Kelly's contact information in the follow-up email that you all receive, as well as a copy of the speaker slides. So like I said, not rushing anyone at all because we have plenty of time for questions, but just wanted to share those with you all.
It looks like we have several educators on here. It looks we will be doing another round, was from my understanding. So if there are dairy businesses that you're working with that are in Alabama, Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, anywhere in the Southeast, as well as Puerto Rico, that would want to do some kind of a business evaluation, then make sure that you're kind of looking for that because there will be another round. So.
Awesome.